In the heart of a lush, vibrant kingdom called Ategbi, nestled between rolling hills and deep, sprawling forest, stood a palace more majestic than any other in the land. Its towering golden spires sparkled in the sunlight, and its grand halls echoed with the laughter and cheer of the court. At the center of this laughter were two jesters, Ogier and Hede, beloved by the king Ojida and the nobles alike. These two jesters had spent years perfecting the art of comedy, balancing their witty banter with physical humor that left their audiences roaring with laughter. But while their lives seemed to be filled with joy and success, they both harbored dark, painful secrets that few knew. Ogier, the elder of the two jesters, had once been a spry and lively man known for his acrobatics and sharp wit. His performances were marked by leaps and tumbles, and he could twist any situation into a joke, his quick tongue saving him in even the most dangerous of predicaments. But as time passed, Ogier's body began to betray him. He developed a chronic illness, one that slowly ate away at his strength. His legs, once as nimble as a gazelle's, now ached with every step. His chest grew tight with fatigue, and his hands often trembled, though he tried his best to hide it. Each performance left him drained, and yet he had no choice but to continue. The king's court was merciless. They expected entertainment every night without fail, and the jesters who disappointed the king rarely saw the next dawn. Hede, on the other hand, was younger, sharp-tongued, and known for her brilliant impersonations and vivid storytelling. She could weave tales so captivating that even the hardest heart softened. But behind her lively facade, Hede was battling demons of her own. Outside the palace walls, she was trapped in a violent and abusive marriage. Her husband, a bitter man fueled by envy and insecurity, often lashed out in fits of rage. He despised her success, believing her time in the palace and among the nobles made her think she was better than him. Night, after performing before the court, Hede would return home to endure his cruelty, hiding her bruises beneath her elaborate costumes and makeup. Though Ogier and Hede rarely spoke of their personal lives, they had come to sense each other's pain. Ogier had noticed the fatigue in Hede's eyes, the way she flinched at loud sounds, the way she sometimes seemed absent during their performances, as though her mind was far away. And Hede, too, saw the growing weakness in Ogier's, the way he struggled to keep up with his old tricks, how his once powerful voice now wavered when he spoke. The court remained oblivious to their suffering. Every night, the jesters painted on their smiles, pulled on their brightly colored costumes, and hid their pain behind laughter. The nobles applauded, showered them with praise, and the king, from his lofty throne, watched with a stern yet approving gaze. The jesters' struggles were invisible to the world, their wounds masked beneath layers of humor and performance. One fateful evening, the king announced a grand banquet to welcome dignitaries from a neighboring kingdom. The palace bustled with preparations. The tables were laden with rich foods, the walls were draped in fine silks, and the air buzzed with excitement. This banquet, however, was no ordinary event. It would determine the strength of the alliance between the two kingdoms. The king's reputation was on the line, and failure was not an option. The jesters were instructed to give the performance of a lifetime. Nothing less than perfection would be accepted. For Ogier and Hede, the pressure was immense. Ogier, now struggling to even walk without pain, knew that this performance could be his last if he faltered. Hede, too, felt the weight of expectation, but her heart was heavier with thoughts of her violent husband waiting at home. Despite the burden, neither could refuse the king's command. They prepared themselves in silence, both knowing that tonight would be unlike any other. The banquet hall was filled with the most powerful and influential people in the kingdom, their eyes glittering with expectation. The jesters entered to applause, but beneath their painted faces, their hearts raced with fear. Ogier started with his usual acrobatics, but his legs wobbled under the strain. His once graceful flips were now clumsy, his landings heavy. Hede followed with her impersonations, but her voice lacked its usual vibrancy, her timing slightly off. The audience began to murmur. The jesters were faltering. The king's eyes narrowed, and a hush fell over the hall. Failure loomed like a dark cloud. In that moment, Ogier, struggling to catch his breath, made a decision. He locked eyes with Hedi, and an understanding passed between them. Without speaking, they both knew they could no longer hide their pain. Ogier, instead of trying to mask his weakness, exaggerated it. He turned his faltering steps into a comedic routine, stumbling deliberately, turning his inability to perform acrobatics into a running gag. He mimicked the movements of an old man, pretending to forget his lines, and his exaggerated stumbles brought the audience to laughter. Hedi, sensing the shift, followed suit. She began weaving a tale of a jester who was constantly distracted, whose mind wandered to distant lands in the middle of a performance. Her voice quivered, but this time, she leaned into it, making her character one of vulnerability and absent-mindedness. Together, they spun a performance unlike any they had ever given. The audience, unaware that they were witnessing the jester's real struggles, roared with laughter. Ogier's failing body became part of the joke, and Hedi's emotional turmoil was turned into an elaborate story. The jesters had taken their pain and transformed it into their greatest act. But the cost was great. As the final applause rang out, Ogier collapsed in the wings, his body finally giving out under the strain. Hedi rushed to his side, her heart pounding with fear. She knew that without him, she would be left to face the king's wrath alone. But as she knelt beside him, the sound of footsteps approached. The king, who had been watching from the shadows, stepped forward. He stood over them, his eyes cold and calculating. But as he looked down at Ogier, gasping for breath, and Hedi trembling with emotion, something softened in his gaze. For the first time, the king saw beyond the masks they wore. He saw the physical pain etched on Ogier's face, the silent terror that lingered in Hedi's eyes. Without a word, the king gestured to his guards. "Take Ogier to the royal physician," he commanded. "And see that Hedi is escorted home, to a new home, far from her husband." The jesters were stunned. It was a small gesture of mercy, but in that moment, it felt like a lifeline. The king had seen their pain, and though his command was cold, it was enough to save them. In the days that followed, Ogier received the care he needed, and Hedi, freed from her abusive marriage, began to heal. They no longer had to perform to survive. Instead, they found new roles within the palace, helping to train the next generation of performers. The palace still echoed with laughter, but it was no longer built on their suffering. Ogier now promoted to a ranking chief in the palace. Anid now becoming an advisor to the queen. The story of the palace jesters became a legend in the kingdom, a tale not just of humor, but of resilience, courage, and the power of finding strength in the face of pain. Though Ogier and Hedi had once been bound by duty and fear, they had found a way to rise above, turning their darkest moments into a testament of survival. Their laughter, once forced and hollow, became genuine, a reminder that even in the darkest times, light could be found, if only one had the courage to keep going.